Hello, and greetings to all you fans of RPGs and of Dungeons & Dragons. This is RPG Mods Fan, and in this walkthrough video, I will be reviewing the third adventure in the Candlekeep Mysteries anthology book. The book itself was published by Wizards of the Coast in January of 2021. This 5th edition D&D adventure is titled Book of the Raven, and it was written by none other than Chris Perkins. The adventure is meant for third-level player characters. Out of all the adventures in Candlekeep Mysteries, this one definitely feels and runs like a side quest. It can easily be transplanted and run like a side quest in the Curse of Strahd campaign. In an interview, Chris Perkins stated that every writer of Candlekeep Mysteries was given the same instructions to pitch a short adventure revolving around a book in Candlekeep's library. Each writer was given the license to create their own book and the mystery surrounding it. In the same interview, Chris Perkins also stated that his adventure was sent out as an example to the various authors. He did not intend to publish it, but I guess he did so anyway. The adventure starts with the player characters doing research in Candlekeep. During their research, they come across a book the Candlekeep librarians call Book of the Raven. Its black oak covers are cracked, unvarnished, with bird scratches and little indentations made by pecking beaks. Nestled inside its pages is a treasure map. Edgar, can you say that again? Oh, You are right. I should now give a spoiler warning. Okay. Players, warning, spoilers ahead. Only Dungeon Masters should be watching the rest of this video. Ha ha, very funny, Edgar. And no, I will not be saying that. Get your bird brain out of the gutter, or whatever else you are pecking your beak into. The synopsis of the adventure would be as follows. A treasure map tucked inside a book leads adventurers to a remote hilltop chalet occupied by a secretive group. This adventure has the trappings of a haunted house mystery and provides a possible route into the Shadowfell. Like most of the adventures in Candlekeep Mysteries, Book of the Raven did not include an adventure overview or summary. As I stated in my prior videos, Candlekeep Mysteries would have benefited having an adventure overview for each of its adventures. Depending on the player's disposition, Book of the Raven can either be played out as a role-playing adventure or as a combat-heavy adventure. The following is my summary of the adventure. Nestled in the Book of the Raven's pages, the adventurers find what they think is a treasure map. They follow the map to Chalet Brantifax, located on a remote hilltop. There, they encounter a group of were-ravens who call themselves the Scarlet Sash. The Scarlet Sash steals evil magic items and artifacts, and then tries to hide them in scattered locations away from villains and evildoers. The encounter with them can play out either peacefully or violently. By exploring the chalet, the adventurers also learn about its tragic backstory. Over 2 centuries ago, Baron Brantifax had the chalet built. He and his wife had 2 daughters, who, unfortunately, died young. Shortly after the death of his beloved hunting hound, the Baron also died by drowning in the chalet's well. The Baroness then left the chalet, never to return. A gateway to the Shadowfell has manifested at one of the daughters' grave. If the adventurers manage to find the gateway, they then may use it to enter the Shadowfell, where they will fight gargoyles and the undead. Book of the Raven is not exactly an event-based adventure. It is more of a sandbox-like adventure. However, the Dungeon Master would need to fill in a lot of missing elements of this sandbox. There are several events that have occurred before the start of this adventure. More than 2 centuries ago, a raven flew into Candlekeep, delivering a book to it. The book became known as the Book of the Raven. It is a first-hand account of a woman who fell off her horse, broke her leg, and was nursed back to health by a group of Vistani who found her. About a century and a half ago, in a remote highlands, Baron Brantifax built a chalet. The Baron was an avid hunter. He and his wife had 2 daughters, but, as I stated earlier, unfortunately died young. Their firstborn daughter, Sylphane, was born deformed and was a tortured soul. She died when she was only 6 years old. Her grave has manifested a gateway to the Shadowfell. Their second daughter, Haluthi, was a tomboy. At 9 years old, she was killed by a wolf while out hunting with her father. The next event in the Baron's tragic tale is his favorite hunting hound named Braun passes away. He becomes distraught, and while sleepwalking, he falls into the chalet's well and drowns. The Baron, his 2 daughters, and the hound are buried in the chalet's graveyard. The Baroness was always a city girl and soon left, never to return. Quite some time afterwards, a flock of were-ravens have moved into the abandoned chalet. By the way, as trivia, groups of ravens that live and travel together are called unkindnesses. This unkindness or flock calls themselves the Scarlet Sash and wear red sashes around their waists when in human form. However, Chris Perkins likes to flip the meanings of things around. Instead of describing the Scarlet Sash as an unkindness of were-ravens, he instead uses the term a kindness of were-ravens. The Scarlet Sash seeks to find and steal evil magic items and artifacts, and then hide them away in scattered locations, in order to keep them away from evildoers. About 140 years ago, Anil Zasperdies, the founder of the Scarlet Sash, went to Candlekeep and placed a map to the chalet into the Book of the Raven. The player characters are meant to discover the book and the map and think that the map is a treasure map. The map is basically the MacGuffin of the adventure's story. And finally, we are at the beginning of the adventure. At the start of the adventure, the player characters are in Candlekeep doing research. They come across the book and the map. Alternatively, if the Dungeon Master does not want to have the adventure start in Candlekeep, the Book of the Raven and the map can be delivered to the player characters via a raven. The raven flies off once it has delivered its cargo. The raven contains the restless soul of Haluthi, who wants the were-raven squatters chased out of the chalet. The adventure assumes the characters follow the map to Chalet Brantifax. The adventure also leaves it up to the DM to add encounters along the way, which I would recommend doing. The player characters arrive and explore the chalet. The only real threats at the chalet are the Scarlet Sash were-ravens. The Scarlet Sash has 8 members, but there are currently 4 members at the chalet. Depending on the disposition of the players, the encounter with the were-ravens can either be a role-playing encounter or a combat encounter. The crossing into the Shadowfell part of the adventure may not even occur. As written, finding the gateway to the Shadowfell will be unlikely. It requires digging up Sylphane's grave. So, if the Dungeon Master wants to run this part of the adventure, he or she may need to resort to giving strong clues. If they are on good terms with the were-ravens, then perhaps have them tell the characters about the gateway, or have the gateway appear just above Sylphane's grave and not require the grave to be dug up. At the Shadowfell side, the characters end up in the middle of a necropolis full of open graves. 2 gargoyles then fly in and attack the characters. Shortly after the battle, waves of ghouls will then attack the party. Inhabiting a nearby mausoleum is a wight named Drovath Harn. He will emerge from his crypt to join the ghouls in the ensuing battle. To return back to the material plane, the characters will need to wait for the gloomy hours of the morning in order to use the gateway back. The gateway will not allow travel back to the material plane outside of those hours. Thus concludes the Book of the Raven adventure. Why did Anil Zasperdies place this map into the Book of the Raven? Well, I don't know. Sometimes it is best not to think about the logic behind a D&D adventure's MacGuffin. The DM is supposed to flesh out the journey to Chalet Brentifax and add a combat encounter or two along the way. In other words, the author did not add such details into the adventure. Displayed on the screen is the layout of Chalet Brentifax. Now, on the screen, each of the rooms are labeled. However, most of these labels were the former functions of the rooms. In the years following the Baron's death, the house fell prey to neglect and disrepair. The Scarlet Sash Wereravens chose the place because of its remoteness and the Shadow Crossing. The well that the Baron fell through and drowned himself in is located in the cellar. In this cold and damp chamber, the characters will hear the faint whispers of the Baron's restless spirit calling out for his hound. In the cloakroom is a shovel. This may be the only clue in the adventure for digging up Sulfine's grave to access the gateway to the Shadowfell. Other than the Wereravens, the chalet lacks any combat encounters. So, the DM may wish to add giant rats in the kitchen. In the study, the player characters can find the Baroness's journal. It basically serves as an exposition dump and recounts the tragedy of the chalet. If the characters disturb the dolls that are in the nursery, then Sulfine's spirit manifests here as a poltergeist. She will at first try to frighten away the characters before resorting to attacking them. The Scarlet Sash Wereravens mainly congregate in the chalet's loft. They have the Orcus figurine, an evil artifact that was carved out of an ogre's petrified heart. Within its vicinity, undead cannot be turned, and the dead cannot be raised. Once per 30 days, it can summon a wraith. The Wereravens are now discussing where to hide the figurine. As an overarching plot hook idea, you can have a cult of Orcus be your campaign's main villain. Members of this cult are seeking to find their stolen artifact. Hence, you can add an encounter against this cult. Buried in the chalet's graveyard are the Baron, his 2 daughters, and his hound. Haluthe's corpse was stolen by a hag and replaced with a scarecrow and 2 crawling claws. As written, accessing the Shadow Crossing requires Sulfine's grave to be dug up. If the player characters cross into the Shadowfell, they will appear in the middle of a large necropolis full of open graves. Watching over the Shadow Crossing are 2 gargoyles who will fly over and attack the party. The battle has attracted the attention of nearby ghouls who will come in waves after the gargoyles have been defeated. The white Drovoth Harn inhabits the nearest mausoleum. He is armed with a longbow and prefers ranged combat and will shoot arrows from atop nearby mausoleums. Gameplay in the Shadowfell is pretty much optional. However, if the Dungeon Master wants to run Curse of Strahd next for their players, the Shadow Crossing is the perfect opportunity to get the characters to go on a one-way trip to the Domains of Dread, which are parts of the Shadowfell. Alternatively, you can have Chalet Brentifax already be in the lands of Barovia and run this adventure as a side quest. Thus ends my walkthrough of the Book of the Raven adventure. I think it is a very good adventure. One of the things that makes it good is that it can be easily molded to fit into any campaign, such as the aforementioned Curse of Strahd or Cult of Orcus. Thank you for watching. Hope this video has been informative and entertaining. Please subscribe, like, share, and comment. I do like feedback. Till next time, this is RPG Mods Fan saying cheers, have a good day, and goodbye.